Well, there is a scenario in all the conference realignment craziness right now that could give us a new Power Four conference. We'll discuss here in this video. Welcome into the channel. I am John Kurtz. Here on this channel, talk college football, conference realignment, college basketball all day, every day. Make sure you click subscribe if you have not. Get in for the live shows on Wednesdays and Sundays. They are a blast with fans from all across the college football world. Yes, little Big 12 heavy, but we have fans from everywhere, and it is lively, man. It is a great time. So make sure you're subscribed so you know when it is that I'm going live. If you would like the video, I would much appreciate that as well. Very easy, free way to support the channel. And let me know in the comments what you think. Is it likely that we wind up with this new Frankenstein Power Four conference? Let me know what you think, and that is another great way to support the channel. With that, here we go. There was a big story dropped the other day by Ross Dellinger this past week with details about everything happening right now in the ACC. And the long and short of it is it's wild. If you have been keeping track, Clemson joined the fray this week along with Florida State. They are suing the ACC. The ACC is in turn suing them back. So they're in the same situation that their rival Florida State is. So Dellinger, I'm going to start in a little ways into his article. He says, even if the courts don't grant an exit fee or a free exit rather from the ACC, Florida State and Clemson feel destined to leave the league, even if that means paying an exorbitant amount, as much as $500 million each, or striking a settlement. And he asked the question, would the ACC give in at some point? I would step in and say there was already a little bit of a sign from that in some of the language that was used by ACC lawyers earlier in a document that we did get to see go public. To use a somewhat tired analogy, the Florida State and Clemson ships have untethered from the ACC port and shoved off into the ocean. There's no turning back now, quote, but where do they go? Asked one industry source. Does one untie from a secure place without an agreement to be welcomed into another? And of course, that brings up the question here of what conference would Clemson or Florida State go to if they were to break free? And that is how we get to, there's actually an option C, which would be a Frankenstein conference where the ACC basically cuts the dead weight, but it would have to blow up and then reform. That's a part of option one here. Complete ACC implosion, Ross Dellinger says. For the most part, the league is held together by the deal with ESPN. There are largely two ways that ESPN itself could set fire to the contract. If the league drops below the requisite 15-member threshold, or if ESPN elects next February to decline to opt into the final 9 years of a contract that extends through 2036. If ESPN ends the deal, or if Florida State and Clemson are successful in setting precedent in exiting the grant of rights, the ACC will be much like the Pac-12, with many of its members left desperate and searching for homes as its more valuable schools either coalesce or join conferences. Now, notice there, he says either coalesce or join conferences. TV money is kind of drying up out there, and even the best brands in the ACC do not appear to be additive right now to the SEC or the Big Ten. If Florida State leaves, if Clemson leaves, Miami, North Carolina, none of these schools seem to bring enough value to up the per school payout for either one of those conferences right now. So that complicates things. So Dellinger says in this scenario, 8 to 10 of the programs could reform the ACC into a smaller and more valuable conference, a curing of the league, and one of the topics discussed among the 7 last spring. And that's a reference to the so-called Magnificent Seven, the 7 schools that made many trips with lawyers to go try to look at the grant of rights at ACC HQ. So this would basically be cutting the least valuable brands out of the deal, reforming as a new conference. You'd probably be paid basically the same amount of money and then be splitting it less ways. You're not having to worry about splitting it upwards of like 16 ways. Instead, you come down to 8 to 10. That can make a big difference in how much money each school is taking in. Dellinger says such a move could conceivably leave a handful of basketball powers like Louisville and Duke to be poached by the country's most valuable basketball conference and its aggressive commissioner, the Big 12, and Brett Yormark. Now, another option here discussed, a sweeping college athletics landscape shakeup. Dellinger says a pay-for-play system is on the horizon, and so maybe too is a complete separation from those programs that can afford to pay their athletes directly and those schools that cannot or choose not to do so. It's been no secret the SEC and Big Ten, as well as the NCAA, are exploring new athlete compensation models in an effort to potentially settle the House antitrust case Such a new model could bring an overhaul to the entire conference landscape of the sport. Could such an overhaul impact TV contracts and disrupt conferences altogether? One thing I think bears mentioning there is, do we get to the point where you're having individual schools negotiating their own TV contracts? That is an idea I know that's been floated at least by some, like John Wilner, I think, had that included in his futuristic piece of what he kind of predicted would happen over the next decade. That has been out there a little bit. For the Big Ten of the SEC, Dellinger says it is unlikely that any SEC or Big Ten school will agree to accept a reduction in their TV distribution to add any school. That's what I meant. When we're talking about being additive, these schools do not appear to be additive. So no one's going to voluntarily say, all right, yeah, come in, you'll get the same share, and then all of our money is going to go down across the board. That will not happen. For the SEC, that is especially so given its footprint. The league already owns a foothold in South Carolina and Florida. Also, the SEC programs in those states would likely make a fuss, if they haven't already, over inviting their league arch rivals into the league, their arch rivals. In order for the Big Ten and SEC to expand, they likely need more money from their TV partners. That's primarily Fox for the Big Ten and ESPN for the SEC. And there's one problem for this, quote, there isn't as much money in the market as there once was, said a conference official with knowledge of the network's dealings. So as discussed earlier, that becomes an issue. But an industry source told Dellinger in this, quote, North Carolina is the linchpin. So North Carolina is a huge factor here. Could North Carolina and NC State be next to make a move against the ACC? How about Miami? And what about Virginia? Another valuable property that would bring a new state into the SEC. All four were involved in the exit discussions last year as well. Conference realignment decisions are often rooted in fear of the unknown, driven at times by panic, exacerbated by the actions of others. Several ACC admins are expected to gather with lawyers over the coming days to review the Clemson lawsuit. The chair of North Carolina's Board of Trustees has made no secret about the school's position. In an interview with Inside Carolina in last January, he said, quote, if the current financial model of the ACC doesn't improve, then it would cause real concern about how Carolina could continue to maintain its excellence in athletics. Can certainly understand that question being raised by North Carolina, and that's basically them saying the same thing Florida State and Clemson have said. We can't continue the rate of our academic, or excuse me, Freudian slip there, right? In conference realignment, or athletic dominance, or whatever you want to call it, their competitive level in athletics. They can't continue it at a 2-1 deficit in the next 5 years, right? If they're making half of what their counterparts in the SEC or Big Ten are making, they cannot continue to compete that way. But it's a little more complicated in North Carolina, as Dellinger points out. In January, a new policy change in the state of North Carolina adds a wrinkle to any realignment. The UNC System Board of Governors voted to give the system president and itself final authority over a school changing conferences. So the policy requires the school chancellor to provide notice and a financial plan for a school's potential conference exit. Significant because there is heavy NC State influence on that board. This has been kind of viewed as a tactic by NC State to try to latch themselves to North Carolina wherever North Carolina is going to go. North Carolina can't just bail in the middle of the night. They have to bring it in front of everybody if they are going to be able to leave. So Dellinger closes out by saying the Tar Heels remain the linchpin to the ACC's future. They are a charter member of the conference, reside in its geographic center, boast an impressive academic reputation, and are arguably the conference's most valuable brand from both a football and basketball perspective, as well as Olympic sports. So if there is going to be a new Frankenstein conference, if the ACC somehow stays together, if there's an exodus to the SEC and or Big Ten, you can bet that North Carolina will be, as was said there, the linchpin in it all. They will be at the forefront of what is happening. So keep your eyes open, keep your eyes peeled, and definitely keep tuning into the channel. We'll continue to update you on everything happening in the ACC. Going to get you an update very soon about what Miami is saying. Now, everybody is kind of being pulled out to the front to have to speak about the Clemson and Florida State lawsuits now that this is getting pretty contentious and pretty crazy in the ACC. So we'll get you the update on Miami here very soon. And make sure you're subscribed so you can check out the live shows on Wednesdays and Sundays and know when that is happening. Like the video and let me know what you think in the comments. Where does North Carolina end up? Where does Clemson end up? Where does Florida State end up? What do you think of the idea of a reformed ACC that has trimmed the fat, so to speak. Appreciate all of you guys for being here. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.